I'm Sarah, 31, a nurse and single mom to two incredible kids, Emma, 9, and Tyler, 7. What happened at my parents' house last weekend completely changed the trajectory of our lives, and I'm still processing it all. A simple pizza order became the catalyst that exposed decades of family toxicity and led to the most empowering decision I've ever made. Growing up in Chicago's affluent North Shore, my family looked perfect from the outside. My parents, Robert and Margaret Chen, built a successful medical practice empire. He's a renowned cardiologist. She's a plastic surgeon. Our Tudor-style mansion in Winnetka was featured in architectural magazines, complete with a tennis court and 3-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. But behind the pristine facade lived a reality of crushing favoritism that always favored my older brother Marcus. At 35, Marcus embodied everything my parents valued. He followed their footsteps into medicine as an orthopedic surgeon, married Victoria, a pharmaceutical heiress, and produced 2 children who attended elite private schools. Marcus was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the disappointment who chose nursing over surgery and married beneath my station. From childhood, the disparities were glaring. Marcus's soccer games were family events requiring everyone's attendance, complete with professional photographers. His school projects were displayed in my father's office like museum pieces. When he struggled with organic chemistry in college, my parents hired a private tutor at $200 per hour. Meanwhile, my nursing school graduation was met with comments like, well, at least you'll always have job security. And nursing is such practical work for someone with your limitations. The pattern intensified when we both had children. Marcus's kids, Alexander, 11, and Sophia, 8, arrive at family gatherings with the latest gaming systems and designer clothes. They interrupt adult conversations, demand specific gourmet meals, and frequently break antiques with minimal consequences. My children, in contrast, have learned to speak only when spoken to, accept whatever is served without complaint, and offer to help clean up, assistance that's usually declined with, "The housekeeper handles that, dear." 3 years ago, my carefully constructed life imploded when I discovered my husband, Derek, was embezzling from the hospital where we both worked. The divorce was swift but devastating, leaving me to raise Emma and Tyler alone while dealing with the financial fallout. Derek now lives in Colorado, sending sporadic child support checks that barely cover daycare expenses. My parents could have offered support during this crisis, but instead provided commentary on how I should have chosen more carefully, and questioning whether I had been too focused on my career to notice the warning signs. Meanwhile, they had just purchased Marcus and Victoria a vacation home in Aspen as an anniversary gift. Despite the emotional toll, I take enormous pride in providing for my children. Emma inherited my love of reading and dreams of becoming a veterinarian, spending hours caring for her collection of stuffed animals. Tyler is fascinated by how things work and constantly conducts kitchen experiments that occasionally result in minor explosions. Both kids are consistently praised by their teachers for kindness and respect, qualities that seem irrelevant to my parents. The monthly family dinners at my parents' estate began when Marcus moved back to Chicago after his residency. Family must stay connected, my mother insisted, though these gatherings quickly became showcases for highlighting the differences between our children's circumstances. Marcus's kids arrive with expensive gadgets and elaborate stories about their latest enrichment activities. Piano lessons with a conservatory professor, horseback riding at an elite stable, science camp at Northwestern University. My children arrive with library books and homemade crafts, excitement about free museum days and community center art classes. The contrast is always noted, usually through passive-aggressive observations like, "It's wonderful that some children can find joy in simple pleasures," or "Public programs certainly serve their purpose for families with budget constraints." Last month, the mistreatment escalated significantly. Marcus had just returned from a medical conference in Switzerland that my parents funded as a professional development opportunity. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts to afford new winter coats for my growing children. During dinner, Marcus regaled everyone with tales of alpine resorts and pharmaceutical company parties while shooting smug glances my way. My parents beamed with pride at how prestigious their son's career was becoming, pointedly noting that international recognition really sets doctors apart from other healthcare workers. I had learned to compartmentalize these slights, telling myself that maintaining family connections was important for Emma and Tyler despite the emotional cost. But I never anticipated what would happen that Sunday evening when a simple pizza order revealed just how expendable my family considered us. That fateful Sunday began like any other weekend morning in our modest 3-bedroom ranch house in Evanston. I woke early despite it being my day off because Emma needed help with her book report and Tyler wanted to practice multiplication tables with me. The autumn sunlight streamed through our kitchen window as I made pancakes shaped like pumpkins, a small tradition that made our tight budget feel less restrictive. "Mom, do you think Grandma will like the bookmark I made her?" Emma asked carefully, placing her craft project in a protective sleeve. She had spent hours creating an intricate design with pressed flowers and calligraphy, meticulously copying a quote about family from her favorite book. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'm sure she'll treasure it," I said, though privately I worried it would join the drawer of my children's creations that never seemed to make it onto my mother's desk, unlike Alexander and Sophia's artwork that was immediately framed and displayed. By noon, I was helping the kids prepare homemade chocolate chip cookies to bring to dinner. My parents never expected Marcus to contribute anything to these meals, but I had been raised with the understanding that guests should never arrive empty-handed. Though we were family, I always felt more like visitors in my childhood home. "Can I add the chocolate chips, Mom?" Tyler asked, standing on his step stool to peer into the mixing bowl. "Absolutely, buddy. Just remember to spread them evenly like I showed you." I demonstrated the gentle folding motion. Just as we were putting the cookies in the oven, I heard an ominous grinding sound from our aging Subaru Outback in the driveway. My heart sank as I ran outside to investigate, finding a puddle of coolant beneath the engine. Car repairs were definitely not in this month's already stretched budget. "Everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked, noticing my expression through the window. "Just a small car issue, honey. Nothing we can't handle." I forced a smile while mentally calculating how I could afford both the repair and groceries this week. I called my neighbor Jim, a retired mechanic who occasionally helped with car troubles. 45 minutes and $85 later, he had temporarily fixed the cooling system, enough for us to make it to my parents' house and back, though he warned I'd need proper repairs within the week. This unexpected expense meant I'd have to postpone buying new shoes for Tyler, whose current pair was developing holes despite my attempts at creative repair. By the time we finally got on the road, we were running 20 minutes late. I called my mother to inform her, only to be met with an exasperated sigh and a comment about punctuality being a sign of respect for others. The familiar tension headache was already forming behind my eyes. We pulled up to the imposing iron gates of my parents' estate at 5:20, 20 minutes after the requested arrival time. The circular driveway was filled with luxury vehicles, including Marcus's new Tesla Model S that I hadn't seen before. "Wow, Uncle Marcus got another new car?" Tyler whispered as we carefully carried the warm cookies up the stone steps to the grand entrance. "It looks like it," I answered neutrally, not wanting to foster resentment in my children. Despite the knot in my stomach, Marcus's previous vehicle had been less than 2 years old. The heavy oak door opened before we could ring the bell, revealing Carmen, my parents' longtime housekeeper, whose kind smile provided the only genuine welcome we could expect. "There in the main parlor, Miss Sarah," she said softly, taking our jackets. "The atmosphere is particularly tense today," she added in a whisper, our long-standing code that warned me to be especially careful. As we walked through the marble foyer, I noticed several expensive suitcases stacked near the guest wing stairs. Before I could wonder about them, my mother's voice rang out from the parlor. "Finally decided to grace us with your presence, Sarah. We were beginning to wonder if you'd gotten lost." My mother sat regally on her favorite antique settee, crystal glass of Chardonnay in hand, not bothering to rise for a greeting. At 64, Margaret Chen maintained the slim figure and perfect posture of her former beauty queen days. her black hair professionally styled in an elegant bob with silver highlights. "I'm sorry we're late. Car trouble," I explained, ushering my children forward. We brought dessert. My father barely glanced up from his medical journal. "Carmen, take that to the kitchen," he instructed without making eye contact. At 67, Robert Chen remained an imposing figure with his full head of distinguished gray hair, custom-tailored suits that he wore even for family dinners. Marcus lounged in the leather armchair, scrolling through his phone. "Car trouble again? Maybe if you invested in reliable transportation instead of that ancient Subaru," he smirked, not looking up from his device. His children, Alexander and Sophia, were sprawled on the Persian rug playing with what appeared to be brand new iPads. Victoria sat beside Marcus, her designer handbag worth more than my monthly salary resting casually on the coffee table. "Grandma? Grandpa! We're here!" Tyler called out enthusiastically, hoping to break the tension. My mother immediately brightened, though not for the reason I'd hoped. "Oh, wonderful timing, darlings. I just remembered we have those science kits in the closet from when your father was young. Carmen cleaned them up for you to take home." Emma stepped forward shyly, holding out her carefully crafted bookmark. "I made this for you, Grandma." My mother took the bookmark with 2 fingers as if it might contaminate her silk blouse. "How? Creative. Carmen can put it somewhere safe." The bookmark was handed off to the housekeeper without a second glance. I swallowed my disappointment and anger, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder as her face fell. "It's beautiful, Emma. Perhaps Grandma can use it in one of her medical journals." My mother made a non-committal sound and turned her attention to Sophia, who was demanding help with her new gaming device. Meanwhile, Tyler stood awkwardly by my side, watching as Alexander demonstrated his iPad's features to my father, who nodded with apparent interest. Something he had never shown in Tyler's science projects or Emma's writing. "Sarah, the children look like they've outgrown their clothes again," my mother observed with a critical eye. "Such a challenging age. They just keep needing new things, don't they?" Before I could respond, Marcus interjected without looking up from his phone. "Well, some of us plan ahead for these expenses, Mother. Not everyone waits until their kids look like they shop at garage sales." The casual cruelty made my chest tighten, but years of practice helped me maintain a neutral expression. "We're managing just fine, thank you." As we settled into the uncomfortable pre-dinner conversation, I noticed more evidence that something unusual was happening. Victoria kept mentioning that she was reassessing certain lifestyle choices, a phrase she repeated with strange emphasis. My father seemed distracted, checking his Apple Watch frequently with a furrowed brow, and my mother, always the perfect hostess, had not even offered us refreshments. After about 30 minutes of strained interaction, my mother suddenly announced, "I'm simply too exhausted to cook tonight after performing 3 surgeries yesterday. We'll order takeout." This was unprecedented. In 12 years of monthly dinners, my mother had never suggested takeout, often making pointed comments about families who can't be bothered to prepare proper meals for their loved ones. My father nodded in agreement. "Excellent idea, Margaret. We'll spare no expense. The children should have whatever they want." The way he emphasized the children while looking only at Marcus's offspring made it clear which grandchildren he meant. As Carmen distributed drinks, including imported sparkling cider for Alexander and Sophia and tap water for Emma and Tyler, I had the distinct feeling that this unusual evening was somehow orchestrated. The tension in the room felt directed at me, though I couldn't yet imagine why. "Let's all gather in the living room to decide what everyone wants," my mother announced, leading us from the formal parlor to the more spacious living area, with its vaulted ceilings and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the manicured gardens. This room, like every space in my parents' home, was immaculately decorated with museum-quality artwork and antiques that children were generally forbidden to touch. Marcus's children, however, immediately sprawled across the cream-colored sectional with their shoes on, leaving small scuff marks that Carmen would later quietly clean. My children perched carefully on the edge of a love seat, their posture perfect from years of being reminded to sit like civilized people. I sat beside them, already mentally calculating how much money I could contribute to this unexpected meal without completely derailing our grocery budget for the week. My father retrieved his Mont Blanc pen and leather portfolio, items he typically used for writing prescriptions or signing important contracts. Now then, what shall we order? Margaret, why don't you ask the children what they'd like? My mother smiled warmly as she turned to my brother's children. Alexander, Sophia, what would you like for dinner tonight? Anything at all. Alexander barely looked up from his iPad. I want deep dish pizza from Giordano's. Not regular pizza, the one with truffle oil and prosciutto like we had in Rome. Sophia twirled her hair around her finger. I want sushi from that place downtown, the one with the rainbow rolls and the edible flowers, and mochi ice cream for dessert. My father dutifully wrote down their orders, nodding approvingly. Excellent choices. Giordano's does have those gourmet options, and Yoshi's has the best omakase selection in the city. Victoria stretched languidly on the sofa. I'll have the salmon poke bowl from that new Hawaiian place, and perhaps some of their organic kombucha. My mother nodded enthusiastically. Wonderful choice, dear. Robert, what about you? I think I'll join Alexander with the pizza. Perhaps some of their truffle breadsticks as well, he replied, still writing in his portfolio. As this exchange continued, I noticed my children whispering quietly to each other, trying to decide what they might order when their turn came. Emma's eyes lit up at the mention of pizza, her favorite food, but one we rarely ordered due to the cost. Tyler was mentally preparing to ask for chicken tenders, his standard choice for special occasions. I smiled encouragingly at them, thinking that despite the usual family tension, at least they would enjoy a special meal. Perhaps this unexpected pizza dinner would actually be a pleasant change from the formal affairs where they were constantly reminded about proper table manners and discouraged from speaking unless spoken to. After my mother finished listing her own order, an elaborate grain bowl from a trendy organic cafe, an awkward silence fell over the room. My children looked expectantly at their grandparents, waiting to be asked for their preferences. I waited as well, not wanting to appear presumptuous by speaking out of turn in my parents' home, a habit deeply ingrained from childhood. The silence stretched for nearly 45 seconds before I gently prompted, Emma, Tyler, what would you two like to eat? Before either child could answer, my mother's expression transformed into the cold mask I knew all too well from my childhood. With a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, she stated flatly, Your kids can eat whatever leftovers are in the refrigerator. They're not guests here. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room as I tried to process what my mother had just said. Beside me, I felt Emma stiffen and Tyler's small hand clutch mine tightly. Before I could formulate a response, Marcus let out a snort of laughter. And don't forget, Sarah, I'm staying here for the next 2 weeks, so you're covering my meals too. He examined his perfectly manicured nails before adding, Victoria and I are having some domestic adjustments, and Mother and Father agreed I should stay here while we sort things out. Since they're covering Alexander and Sophia's expenses, you can handle mine. My mind raced to make sense of this bizarre situation. Why would I be covering Marcus's meal expenses at our parents' house? Why were my children being told to eat leftovers? What was happening? My father cleared his throat authoritatively, the sound bringing me back to countless childhood moments when he would render judgment on some perceived failure of mine. And don't just sit there looking confused, Sarah. Go set the table like you used to. That's what you're good for, isn't it? Taking care of the details no one else wants to bother with. In that moment, something crystallized within me. Years of subtle and not so subtle put-downs, of financial manipulation, of watching my children being treated as less worthy than their cousins, all condensed into a single point of clarity. This wasn't a family gathering. This was a power play designed to establish dominance before asking for something significant. The suitcases in the hallway, Marcus's comments about staying for 2 weeks, the unusual tension, it all suddenly made sense. They needed something from me. And this humiliation was meant to soften me up, to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy before they made their request. I looked at my children's faces, saw the hurt and confusion in their eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. In that frozen moment, memories cascaded through my mind like a flood. Last Christmas, when Emma's carefully saved allowance had bought thoughtful gifts for her grandparents, only to be opened with forced smiles and immediately forgotten, while Sophia's hastily scribbled card was praised as artistic genius. Tyler's 8th birthday, when my parents arrived 2 hours late with elaborate gifts for Alexander, so he wouldn't feel left out, but nothing for the birthday boy himself. Last Easter, when my mother commented that my homemade dinner rolls looked adequate for someone without formal culinary training, before serving store-bought bread instead. For years, I had accepted this treatment, telling myself it was important for my children to have relationships with their grandparents despite the emotional cost. I had convinced myself that enduring humiliation was somehow noble, that turning the other cheek was teaching my children patience and resilience. But looking at their downcast eyes now, I realized I had been teaching them something far more damaging, that they should accept being treated as less than worthy of basic respect. With a calm that surprised even me, I reached for my children's hands. "Emma, Tyler, we're leaving," I said quietly but firmly. My father's head snapped up from his portfolio. "Don't be ridiculous, Sarah. You're overreacting as usual." "No one is leaving," my mother added with an icy smile. "You always do this. Make a scene over nothing. The children can have sandwiches from the kitchen. It's not as if they appreciate gourmet food anyway." Marcus rolled his eyes dramatically. "Here comes the martyr act. Poor Sarah, always so persecuted. Just accept that some people matter more than others. That's reality." I stood, still holding my children's hands. "No, that's your reality, not ours. Not anymore." My father waved dismissively. "Sit down, Sarah. This childish display is embarrassing. We have important matters to discuss after dinner regarding family financial obligations." Something in his tone confirmed my suspicions that there was more happening here than just the usual power dynamics. But whatever crisis or scheme was brewing, I suddenly realized I didn't care. I had spent my entire life caring too much about these people who cared so little for me or my children. "I'm sure you do have important matters to discuss, but they'll have to wait for another time," I replied, guiding my children toward the door. My mother's face registered genuine surprise, as if she truly hadn't expected me to actually leave. "You can't just walk out. What about family loyalty?" The irony of her statement was so profound I almost laughed. Loyalty goes both ways, Mother. As we reached the foyer, I knelt down to my children's level. "Go get your jackets, please. We're going to have a special dinner somewhere else tonight." Their eyes widened in confusion, but also relief. "Are you sure, Mom?" Emma whispered. "Grandma seems really angry." "I'm very sure, sweetheart. We deserve to be treated with respect, and if we can't find that here, we'll go somewhere we can." As the children went to retrieve their jackets from Carmen, who was hovering nearby with a sympathetic expression, Marcus appeared in the foyer doorway. "You know they only invited you today because they need something from you," he said, his voice holding a strange mix of spite and something that almost sounded like envy. "They were going to ask you to let me stay at your place for a while, but I told them you'd never agree unless they broke you down first." The pieces clicked into place. "Stay at my place? Why would you need to stay with me?" Marcus examined his manicured nails, avoiding eye contact. "Just some temporary domestic arrangements. Victoria and I are reassessing our living situation. Nothing serious." Before I could process this revelation fully, my father appeared behind Marcus. "Sarah, stop this nonsense immediately. Your brother needs your help, and as family, you're obligated to provide it." "My 3-bedroom ranch house that you've repeatedly called adequate for your modest means is suddenly acceptable housing for Marcus?" I asked, the absurdity of the situation becoming clearer by the moment. "It's only for a few weeks until we sort out some temporary arrangements," my father replied stiffly. "Your brother has certain standards that need to be maintained during this transition." "And my children, what are their standards worth to this family?" My mother appeared now, completing the wall of disapproval facing me. "You're being selfish, Sarah. Your brother is in a delicate position right now." Emma and Tyler returned with their jackets, standing close to me as they sensed the tension. I placed protective hands on their shoulders. We're leaving now. If you want to discuss Marcus staying with us, you can call tomorrow and ask properly, with the respect you would show any other adult you're asking for significant help. Marcus snorted. She's actually leaving. I told you she's become difficult since the divorce. As we turned toward the door, my father called out, "If you leave now, don't expect our help when you inevitably need it. Family loyalty isn't something you can just dismiss when it's inconvenient." I paused, looking back at the three of them standing there, unified in their entitlement and condescension. I've never received your help when I needed it. Not when Derek left. Not when I needed childcare to keep my job. Not when Emma needed glasses. What I have received is judgment, criticism, and constant reminders that we're somehow less valuable than the rest of this family. That ends tonight. With that, I guided my children outside, ignoring the continuing protests behind us. As we walked to the car, Tyler looked up at me with wide eyes. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" I squeezed his hand reassuringly. "No, sweetheart. I think we're finally out of trouble." As we drove away from the estate, I felt a strange lightness despite the uncertainty ahead. I glanced at my children in the rearview mirror, noting their confused but relieved expressions, and made a spontaneous decision. "How would you two feel about having dinner at Lou Malnati's tonight?" Their gasps of excitement told me everything I needed to know. Lou Malnati's was the kind of Chicago institution we drove past but never entered, the kind of place where a single deep dish pizza would cost more than our weekly grocery budget. But tonight, it felt important to make a statement, not to my family, but to my children and myself. We were worth more than leftovers from anyone's kitchen. Lou Malnati's downtown location glowed warmly against the October evening sky. The hostess raised her eyebrows slightly at our casual Sunday attire amid a crowd of tourists and locals celebrating special occasions, but greeted us with a professional smile. "Welcome to Lou Malnati's. Do you have a reservation?" "No, I'm afraid we don't," I admitted, suddenly wondering if this impulsive decision would end in disappointment. To my surprise, she checked her tablet and nodded. "We had a cancellation. We can seat you in about 10 minutes if that works." The relief must have shown on my face. "That would be perfect. Thank you." As we waited in the bustling lobby, Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Mom, can we really eat here? Isn't it super expensive?" I knelt to her level, meeting her concerned eyes. "Tonight is special, sweetie. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves of our own worth, and this is one of those times." Tyler was wide-eyed, taking in the Chicago memorabilia and the rich aroma of garlic and cheese. "This place smells amazing," he whispered with awe. "Do they really make the pizza with the cheese on the bottom?" I laughed softly. "They do, and you can order whatever you want tonight." When we were finally seated at a red-checkered table, a waitress promptly appeared with a genuine smile. "Good evening, folks. I'm Jessica, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" The children ordered root beer floats, a treat that made their eyes light up, while I splurged on a glass of wine, something I almost never did due to both cost and the need to always keep a clear head as a single parent. When Jessica returned with our drinks, we placed our order. Tyler chose a personal-size pepperoni deep dish pizza, while Emma selected the spinach and ricotta. I chose a salad and decided we'd share a small sausage pizza, still mindful of costs despite my earlier bravado. As Jessica departed with our order, Emma looked at me with searching eyes. "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us now?" I took a sip of my wine, considering how to answer. "They're probably upset, yes, but being upset doesn't give anyone the right to treat others unkindly." "Why did Grandma say we should eat leftovers?" Tyler asked, his young face creased with confusion. "Did we do something wrong?" My heart ached at his question, at the thought that he might believe he deserved such treatment. "No, sweetheart, you did absolutely nothing wrong. Sometimes adults have complicated feelings that make them say unkind things, but that reflects on them, not on you." "Is Uncle Marcus really going to live with us?" Emma asked, concern evident in her voice. "Our house is pretty small, and Alexander and Sophia aren't very nice to our things." I reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "No, honey. We won't be having house guests anytime soon. Our home is our safe place, and we get to decide who comes into it." As our conversation continued, I watched my children gradually relax, their shoulders lowering from their defensive posture, their smiles becoming more genuine. They began to chat about school and friends, the earlier tension melting away in this unexpected luxury. When our food arrived, beautifully presented and in portions generous enough to ensure leftovers for tomorrow's lunch, both children's eyes widened. "This is the biggest pizza I've ever seen," Tyler exclaimed, staring at his personal deep dish. "Mine has real spinach leaves on top," Emma marveled, examining her slice with scientific interest. We savored every bite, the exceptional quality making even familiar flavors taste extraordinary. As I watched my children enjoy this rare treat, I realized I had never truly stood up for them before. I had taught them to tolerate disrespect, to accept less than they deserved, all in the name of maintaining family connections that were toxic at their core. "I need to use the restroom," I told them when we had finished our main courses. "I'll be right back. Would you like to look at the dessert menu while I'm gone?" Their enthusiastic nods made me smile as I made my way across the restaurant. Once inside the elegant restroom, I pulled out my phone and stared at it for a long moment before making a call I should have made years ago. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Sarah, is that you, dear?" "Hello, Aunt Rebecca," I said, my voice catching slightly. "I hope I'm not calling too late." Rebecca Martinez had been my mother's younger sister, and once her closest confidant before a falling out 15 years ago that neither woman ever fully explained to me. She had remained in my life sporadically, sending birthday cards and graduation gifts, though my parents had discouraged me from maintaining close contact. At 58, Rebecca was unmarried, childless, and according to family gossip, extremely wealthy from her successful tech startup that she'd sold to Google. It's never too late to hear from you, Mija, though I admit I'm surprised. "Is everything all right? You sound upset." Something about her warm concern broke through the emotional walls I had maintained all evening. In a rush of words, I found myself explaining everything, from the years of subtle mistreatment to tonight's blatant cruelty. I told her about my children being told to eat leftovers, about Marcus's apparent domestic troubles, about my father's manipulative tactics. There was a long pause when I finished speaking, and for a moment I feared I had overstepped by unburdening myself to someone I hadn't spoken with in months. "I've been waiting for this call for a very long time," Rebecca finally said, her voice both sad and resolute. "I always wondered when you would reach your breaking point with them." "You knew?" I asked, surprised. "Of course I knew, Sarah. Why do you think Margaret and I had our falling out?" I confronted her about how she treated you compared to Marcus when you were just teenagers. Robert was already showing such blatant favoritism, and I told Margaret she needed to balance the scales to make sure you felt equally valued. She accused me of interfering in her parenting and told me I'd never understand because I didn't have children of my own. I leaned against the marble counter, absorbing this revelation. "I never knew. Your mother made it clear that if I ever told you the truth, I'd be cut off from seeing you entirely. So I stayed on the periphery, sending gifts, watching from a distance, hoping you would eventually see the situation for what it really was. And now I have," I said quietly. "And now you have," she agreed. "So what happens next, Miga?" I took a deep breath. "I don't know. I just walked out on my family. Marcus apparently needs a place to stay at FIA, which suggests they're having problems they haven't disclosed. My car needs repairs I can't really afford, and I just brought my children to Lou Malnati's of all places." Rebecca's laugh was warm and genuine. "Good for you. A perfect choice for your Declaration of Independence." "A declaration I can't afford," I admitted ruefully. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've always planned to leave you a significant inheritance. Your mother knows this, which is likely another reason she's kept you tethered to the family despite the emotional cost. But I see no reason to wait until I'm gone for you to benefit from my success." "Rebecca, I didn't call to ask for money," I protested, horrified at the thought that she might think that was my motivation. "I know you didn't, Mija. That's precisely why I want to help you. I have more money than I could spend in several lifetimes and no direct heirs. I'd like to set up a trust for you and the children immediately, not after my death." My head spun with the implications. I don't know what to say. Say yes, and then listen carefully, because there's something else you should know about your parents' current situation, something that explains Marcus's sudden need for housing. For the next few minutes, Rebecca shared information that made me grip the counter for support. Apparently, my father's medical practice had been struggling for years due to malpractice settlements he'd hidden from the family. Recent poor investments in medical technology startups had pushed them close to bankruptcy. The estate had been mortgaged multiple times, with Rebecca herself holding the most recent loan after the banks had refused further financing. "They're 4 months behind on payments to me," she explained. "I haven't pursued it because I was waiting to see how they would handle the situation, whether they would finally treat you as an equal family member when they needed help." Tonight's behavior answers that question definitively, I managed to say. When I returned to the table, I found my children happily sharing a massive chocolate chip deep dish cookie, their faces alight with sugar-induced joy. My phone had begun buzzing repeatedly in my purse. My parents, and Marcus's names flashing on the screen. I silenced it without answering. "Is everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked, perceptive as always. I smiled, feeling a genuine lightness I hadn't experienced in years. "Everything is better than okay, sweetheart. I think things are about to change for us in some very good ways." After paying the bill, which caused only a momentary pang of financial anxiety now that I understood help was coming, we drove home to our modest house. The entire way, my phone continued to buzz with calls and text messages that I continued to ignore. Whatever crisis was unfolding at my parents' estate would wait until tomorrow. Tonight was for my children, for rebuilding what had been damaged by years of accepting less than we deserved. We arrived home to our tree-lined street just after 9 p.m., the children chattering excitedly about their unexpected fine dining experience. Our ranch-style house had never felt more like a sanctuary than it did that night, its modesty suddenly cozy rather than cramped, its simplicity honest rather than lacking. "Can we watch a movie before bed, Mom?" Tyler asked, still riding the high of our unusual evening. On a normal Sunday, I would have insisted on early bedtime to prepare for the school week ahead. But nothing about this day had been normal, and I found myself nodding. "One short one. You pick." As the children settled on our well-worn sectional with a Pixar film, I finally checked my phone. 31 missed calls and 52 text messages waited, their urgency practically radiating from the screen. The text told a story of escalating panic. From my mother, "Sarah, stop this childish behavior and come back immediately." From my father, "Your brother needs your help. This is a family matter." From Marcus, "You always were dramatic. Mother and father are furious." As time passed, the tone changed dramatically. From my mother, "Please call us back. We need to discuss important matters." From my father, "Sarah, this is urgent. Financial situation requires family discussion." From Marcus, "Look, I'm sorry about the leftover comment. Just call back." And finally, the most recent messages. From my mother, "Rebecca called us. Please, we need to talk." From my father, "Whatever Rebecca told you, we can explain. Don't make any decisions yet." From Marcus, "Are you really going to let Rebecca Martinez turn you against your own family after everything we've done for you?" I almost laughed at that last one. The audacity of claiming they had done anything for me, when the reality had been quite the opposite. I silenced my phone again and joined my children for the movie, deciding that whatever drama was unfolding could wait until morning. After tucking the children into bed with extra hugs and reassurances that they had done nothing wrong at their grandparents' house, I prepared for the week ahead, laying out school clothes and packing lunches as I always did on Sunday nights. The routine was comforting, a reminder that despite the emotional earthquake of the evening, our daily life would continue. I slept surprisingly well and woke early to call the hospital and request a rare personal day. My supervisor, knowing my perfect attendance record, readily agreed. Next, I called my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who sometimes watched my children after school, and arranged for her to take them for the day. At 9 sharp, there was a knock at my front door. Rebecca stood there, elegant in a simple charcoal pantsuit, her dark hair styled in a professional bob. Behind her stood a serious-looking woman carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning, Mija," she greeted me with a warm hug. "This is Ms. Rodriguez, my attorney. I hope you don't mind that I brought her, but after our conversation last night, I thought it prudent to formalize certain arrangements immediately." We settled at my small kitchen table with coffee, the attorney efficiently arranging documents beside her. Rebecca explained that she had indeed called my parents after our conversation, informing them that she would be accelerating the timeline on certain financial matters. The mortgage on their property is now officially in default, she explained. Normally, this would trigger a lengthy foreclosure process, but there's a clause in our agreement that accelerates the timeline in case of... She glanced at her attorney, who supplied the term, material adverse change in financial condition. Ms. Rodriguez cleared her throat. In simple terms, Ms. Martinez has the legal right to call the entire loan due immediately, based on information about other debts and financial misrepresentations that have recently come to light. I stared at them, trying to process the implications. "Are you saying my parents could lose their house?" Rebecca patted my hand gently. "They were going to lose it anyway, Sarah. Robert's practice has been hemorrhaging money for nearly 3 years. He's been borrowing increasingly desperate sums at astronomical interest rates to maintain appearances. Marcus's marriage to Victoria isn't just having domestic adjustments. She filed for divorce last week after discovering he'd been gambling away their savings at the casino. He's lost their house too, which is why he needs somewhere to stay." My head spun with these revelations. The perfect, wealthy family I had always felt inferior to had been a facade crumbling from within while maintaining pristine appearances. What does all this mean for them? "For us?" I asked. Ms. Rodriguez slid a document toward me. "Ms. Martinez would like to establish a trust for you and your children. The initial funding would be $2.5 million, with provisions for educational expenses, housing, and health care. You would serve as trustee with full discretionary power over distributions." I nearly choked on my coffee. $2.5 million? Rebecca smiled. "A small portion of what you'll eventually inherit, but enough to secure your independence immediately. There's also a provision for purchasing a new home should you wish to relocate." As I tried to absorb this life-changing offer, another knock came at the door. This one more like insistent pounding. I opened it to find my entire family standing there. My father looking disheveled without his usual suit jacket, my mother's hair uncharacteristically messy, Marcus red-eyed and wearing what appeared to be the same clothes as yesterday, and his children looking confused and cranky. "We need to talk," my father said without preamble, attempting to push past me into the house. I stood firm in the doorway. "This isn't a good time." My mother peered past me, her eyes widening at the sight of Rebecca and the attorney at my kitchen table. "So it's true. You've aligned yourself with her against your own family." Rebecca rose and approached the door. "Margaret, Robert, Marcus. What a surprise. I was just explaining to Sarah the new financial arrangements I've made for her and her children." My father's face flushed deep red. "This is a family matter, Rebecca. You have no right to interfere." "I gained that right when you mortgaged your property to me, Robert," Rebecca replied coolly, "and when you defaulted on our agreement." Marcus pushed forward, his composure cracking. "Sarah, you have to help us. They're going to take everything. Where are my children supposed to live?" For the first time, I truly looked at my brother, seeing beyond the perfect exterior to the desperate man beneath. Despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy, not for him, but for his children, who were innocent in all this. "Perhaps we should all come inside and discuss this civilly," I suggested, stepping back to allow them entry. "The children can watch TV in the living room while we talk." Once Alexander and Sophia were settled with Emma's tablet in the living room, the adults gathered around my small kitchen table, an uncomfortable tableau of family dysfunction. My father immediately launched into accusations about Rebecca's underhanded tactics and my betrayal, while my mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I held up my hand, silencing his tirade. "Before we go any further, I want to understand exactly what has been happening. No more lies, no more manipulation." Over the next hour, the truth emerged in fragments, each revelation more shocking than the last. My father's medical practice had indeed been failing due to several malpractice suits he'd hidden from the family. Marcus had been gambling compulsively for years, accumulating massive debts that Victoria had only recently discovered. My parents had been planning to ask me to house Marcus and his children indefinitely while they attempted to salvage what remained of their assets. "We were going to compensate you, of course," my father insisted, though the details of this supposed compensation remained conveniently vague. "By treating my children like servants and telling them to eat leftovers?" I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. My mother had the grace to look embarrassed. That was poor phrasing. The stress of the situation has been enormous. "Stress doesn't make you tell children they're not worthy of the same meal as their cousins, Margaret," Rebecca interjected firmly. "It simply reveals what you truly think of them." As the conversation continued, it became clear that my family had come not to apologize, but to secure my help on their terms. They expected access to whatever financial assistance Rebecca provided me, presenting it as their due for years of including me and my children in family gatherings. Finally, after listening to their expectations and demands, I took a deep breath and spoke from my heart. "I'm willing to help, but on my terms, not yours. Marcus and his children can stay with me for 3 weeks while they find suitable housing. During that time, they will treat my home and my children with respect. After that, I'll help you find affordable housing and connect you with financial counseling services." My father's face darkened with anger. "You can't be serious. 3 weeks? Financial counseling? Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm talking to family members who need my help but who have never shown me or my children basic respect. That changes now, or there will be no help at all." For the first time in my life, I watched my father rendered speechless. My mother looked as though she might faint from the shock of being addressed this way. Marcus stared at me with a mixture of resentment and dawning respect. "Those are my boundaries," I continued. "You can accept them or leave, but they are not negotiable." In that moment, looking at their faces, I realized a profound truth. Their power over me had always been an illusion, sustained by my own need for approval and acceptance. Now that I no longer sought either, that power had evaporated like morning fog. 6 months later, as I sit on the porch of my new home, watching my children play in the spacious backyard with their cousins under very different circumstances, it's hard to believe how drastically our lives have transformed since that fateful Sunday dinner. The first few weeks after the confrontation were challenging, but necessary. True to my word, I allowed Marcus and his children to stay in our house temporarily. The close quarters forced conversations that should have happened years ago, piercing the veil of pretense that had separated us as siblings. One evening, after the children were asleep, Marcus broke down and admitted how much he had resented the pressure to be perfect. How beneath his medical degree and designer clothes, he had always felt like he was performing a role rather than living his own life. "You built something real," he confessed tearfully. I never learned how. That conversation marked the beginning of a fragile new understanding between us. Not instant friendship, but a mutual respect that had never existed before. With Rebecca's help, I purchased a comfortable 4-bedroom house in a family-friendly neighborhood in Wilmette, with a garden for the children to explore and space for me to start a private tutoring business for children with learning difficulties. The trust she established ensured that Emma and Tyler would never have to worry about college tuition or medical expenses, lifting an enormous weight I had carried since their birth. My parents downsized dramatically, moving from their estate to a modest townhouse in Evanston. The transition wasn't easy for them, particularly my mother, who struggled with the loss of her social standing. But as the months passed, I began to see subtle changes in them too. My father, forced to close his practice due to the malpractice settlements, discovered an unexpected talent for teaching when he began volunteering at a community health clinic. My mother, initially devastated without her staff and elaborate home to manage, gradually became involved in hospital volunteer work that seemed to give her a purpose beyond appearances. Marcus found an apartment within his new budget and, for the first time in his adult life, took a position at a community hospital rather than a prestigious private practice. The work was more demanding, but seemed to give him a satisfaction that his previous career had lacked. Most importantly, he began attending Gamblers Anonymous and working with a therapist to address the underlying issues that had driven his destructive behavior. The dynamics with the children shifted dramatically. Without the toxic atmosphere of comparison and favoritism, all four cousins began to develop genuine friendships. Alexander and Sophia, initially resentful of their reduced circumstances, gradually adapted and even seemed relieved by the more structured expectations in their new lives. Weekly family therapy sessions, another condition I had insisted upon for my continued involvement, helped all of us navigate the complex emotions and patterns that had defined our relationships for so long. Our therapist, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, skillfully guided us through difficult conversations about hurt, expectations, and the possibility of forgiveness without forgetting. Boundaries are not walls, she reminded us in a recent session. They are gates that you control. You decide when to open them and how wide. This wisdom helped me maintain the delicate balance between compassion for my family's situation and protection of my own emotional well-being. I could offer help without sacrificing my self-respect or my children's sense of worth. Rebecca became a regular presence in our lives, the grandmother figure my children had always deserved. Her wisdom, humor, and unconditional support healed wounds I hadn't even recognized I carried. Sometimes the family we need isn't the one we're born into, she told me once as we watched the children playing. Sometimes we have to create it for ourselves. One Sunday evening, almost exactly 6 months after the pizza incident, I hosted a family dinner at my new home. As everyone gathered around my dining room table, the contrast with our previous Sunday traditions couldn't have been more striking. The conversation flowed naturally, without the undercurrents of judgment and competition that had once poisoned every interaction. When Tyler proudly showed everyone his science fair project, my mother actually asked thoughtful questions about his hypothesis before offering genuine praise. Later, as I cleared the dishes, my father approached me awkwardly. "You have a lovely home, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying an unfamiliar note of humility, "and you've done a remarkable job with your children." Coming from him, this simple acknowledgement meant more than any grand gesture could have. "Thank you, Dad," I replied, accepting the olive branch for what it was. Not an apology for decades of favoritism, but perhaps the beginning of something new. The journey hasn't been perfect. Old habits resurface, especially under stress. Marcus occasionally slips into entitlement. My mother sometimes makes insensitive comparisons, and my father still struggles to show interest in my children's achievements. But the difference now is that these behaviors are addressed openly rather than silently endured. What I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the hardest moment becomes the doorway to a better life. That standing up for yourself and your children isn't selfish, but essential. That teaching others how to treat you requires courage, but brings freedom. Most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to rewrite the story of your family, to break patterns of toxicity that have persisted for generations. Each time I see my children stand a little taller, speak a little more confidently, I know that whatever difficulties lie ahead, we've already won the most important battle. If you're reading this and struggling with similar family dynamics, please know that you deserve respect and kindness. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about protecting yourself and those you love. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away from the table where love is served with conditions and find one where everyone is equally nourished. I'd love to hear your stories of standing up to family toxicity or setting boundaries that changed your relationships. Leave a comment below sharing your experience or any questions you might have. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and transformation. And remember, sharing these stories helps others know they're not alone. So hit that share button if you know someone who might need to hear this message today. Thank you for reading, and may you find the courage to create the family life you truly deserve, whether with the family you were born into or the one you choose to create.